The rain hammered against the windows of Cafe Aria like tiny fists demanding entry. Inside, the warm glow of amber lights created a cocoon against Seoul's relentless November downpour. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the sweet aroma of cinnamon rolls baking in the back kitchen, creating an atmosphere that usually calmed Amara Bennett's frayed nerves after long days of teaching English to distracted teenagers. Today, nothing could calm her. Her hands trembled slightly as she balanced the tray carrying 3 Americanos and a caramel macchiato. The cafe was packed, every table occupied by Seoul's afternoon crowd seeking refuge from the storm. Students hunched over laptops, their fingers flying across keyboards. Business people conducted hushed meetings in corner booths. An elderly couple shared a slice of cheesecake, their wrinkled hands intertwined on the marble tabletop. Amara had been working at Cafe Aria for 3 months now, ever since arriving in Seoul on her university exchange program. The money wasn't great, but it paid for her tiny studio apartment in Mapogu and left enough for instant ramyeon and the occasional subway ride. Her manager, Mr. Park, was decent enough when he wasn't stressed about meeting quotas. The other servers, mostly Korean women in their early 20s, kept their distance. Not hostile exactly, just careful. She was used to it by now, being the only black woman in most spaces she occupied in this city. She'd learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable, to blend into the background despite her rich, dark skin that seemed to absorb and reflect the cafe's warm lighting in equal measure. Her natural curls were pulled back into a neat bun, not a strand out of place. Her uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron, fit perfectly. She'd learned quickly that presentation mattered here, perhaps more than anywhere else she'd lived. The table she was approaching sat in the cafe's prime location, the corner booth with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-soaked street. 4 men occupied the space, all dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than her entire semester's tuition. 3 of them were engaged in quiet conversation, their voices too low for her to hear over the cafe's ambient noise and soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. But the 4th man, he commanded attention without saying a word. He sat facing the window, his profile sharp and perfect, like something carved from marble by an artist who understood the dangerous beauty of predatory creatures. His black hair was styled back from his forehead, revealing a face that seemed too symmetrical to be entirely human. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, lips that appeared both cruel and sensual in their perfect formation. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, the fabric clearly custom-tailored to accommodate his broad shoulders and lean frame. A platinum watch caught the light on his wrist, the kind that cost as much as a luxury car. A thin gold chain gleamed at his throat, and on his right hand, a black onyx ring sat on his middle finger like a seal of authority. But it was his eyes that made Amara's steps falter. Dark, almost black, they stared out at the rain with an expression of such profound coldness that she felt the temperature drop around his table. There was no warmth there, no hint of the emotions that usually played across human faces. Just calculation and a kind of stillness that reminded her of apex predators she'd seen in nature documentaries, the ones that didn't need to move quickly because they knew their prey had nowhere to run. She'd seen him before, twice this week, always in the same corner, always surrounded by the same serious men, always ordering the same thing. A double espresso, black, no sugar. Mr. Park had been unusually nervous both times, practically bowing as he personally delivered the order. The other servers had whispered about him in the break room, their voices hushed and anxious. But Amara's Korean wasn't good enough to catch the details. Now, as she approached with their order, she felt her pulse quicken for reasons she couldn't quite name. The other 3 men noticed her first, their conversation stopping mid-sentence as they tracked her movement. One of them, younger with bleached hair and multiple ear piercings, smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Another, older with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, simply stared with the intensity of someone assessing a potential threat. The 4th man, the one by the window, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. "Your order," Amara said in her carefully practiced Korean, her accent still thick despite months of language apps and awkward conversations. She set down the first cup in front of the scarred man, then the second in front of the younger one. "One Americano, one caramel macchiato." That's when it happened. A businessman at the adjacent table stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that made Amara jump. Her hand jerked, and the tray tilted. Time seemed to slow as she watched the double espresso, the expensive black coffee meant for the man by the window, slide across the lacquered surface of the tray and tip over the edge. The cup hit his shoulder, and hot coffee exploded across the front of his suit. Dark liquid soaked into the charcoal fabric, spreading like blood across his chest and lap. Steam rose from the expensive material. The entire cafe went silent. Not the quiet of people focused on their own activities, but the absolute silence of collective shock. Conversations died mid-word. Keyboard clicking stopped. Even the espresso machine seemed to pause in its hissing. Every eye in the cafe turned to their table. Amara stood frozen, the empty tray clutched in her hands, staring at the damage she'd done. The man remained perfectly still, coffee dripping from his suit jacket onto the leather seat beneath him. He didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't react at all to what must have been painfully hot liquid soaking through to his skin. Slowly, with movements that seemed almost mechanical in their precision, he turned his head to look at her. Those dark eyes fixed on her face, and Amara felt like she'd been pinned in place by something sharp and unforgiving. Up close, he was even more striking, and infinitely more terrifying. There was no anger in his expression, no surprise, no emotion at all. Just that same profound coldness, like looking into the eyes of something that had forgotten how to feel human things. "I'm so sorry," Amara stammered, her English tumbling out before she could catch it, her practiced Korean fleeing her mind entirely. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. Someone stood up and I..." Mr. Park materialized beside her as if summoned by the catastrophe. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with what looked like genuine terror. He grabbed Amara's arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and yanked her backward. "You stupid girl," he hissed in Korean, then switched to halting English for her benefit. "Do you know who this is? Do you know what you've done?" The man finally moved. He stood with fluid grace, coffee still dripping from his suit, and reached for a napkin on the table. He dabbed at the stain with movements that seemed almost leisurely, as if he had all the time in the world. The other 3 men at the table had tensed, their hands moving to their sides in synchronized motion that suggested weapons hidden beneath their jackets. "Get on your knees," Mr. Park commanded, pushing down on Amara's shoulder. "Apologize properly, now." But as Mr. Park tried to force her down, as the weight of his hand pressed on her shoulder, and the entire cafe held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen to the foolish girl who'd assaulted someone who was clearly very, very important, something in Amara's brain short-circuited. Maybe it was the stress of too many 18-hour days juggling teaching and serving. Maybe it was the exhaustion of 6 months navigating a country where she would always be an outsider. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of the moment, the melodrama of an entire cafe frozen in horror over spilled coffee. Whatever it was, instead of fear or appropriate shame, Amara felt a bubble of nervous laughter rise in her chest. She tried to swallow it, tried to force it down, but it escaped as a small, strangled giggle. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. Every head swiveled back to her. Mr. Park's grip on her shoulder tightened painfully. The 3 men at the table looked at her like she'd just signed her own death warrant. And the man with coffee soaking his expensive suit finally showed an emotion. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Just a millimeter, barely noticeable. But in the context of his previous immobility, it was practically an explosion of expression. "I'm sorry," Amara said again, but another nervous laugh bubbled out. She clapped her hand over her mouth, horrified at herself. I'm so sorry. It's just, you look more upset about losing the coffee than about the stain on your suit. The words tumbled out in English before she could stop them. The inappropriate observation, the nervous humor that had gotten her in trouble countless times in her 23 years, the inability to read a room and understand when silence was not just preferred, but potentially life-saving. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The man stared at her, and Amara saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Not anger, not exactly. Something more complicated. Surprise, maybe. Or calculation. Like he was looking at a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter, and was now trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together. Then his lips curved. Just slightly, barely enough to be called a smile, but unmistakably there. It wasn't a warm expression. It was the kind of smile a shark might give before taking a bite, dangerous and predatory, and infinitely worse than his previous coldness. She laughed at me, he said, his voice smooth and cultured, speaking in perfect English with barely a trace of accent. The words were quiet, almost conversational, but they carried through the silent cafe like a pronouncement. Nobody has ever laughed at me before. He took a step toward her, and Amara's nervous humor evaporated instantly, replaced by the very appropriate fear she should have felt from the beginning. Up close, he was even more imposing, easily 6 feet tall with a presence that seemed to take up more space than his physical form should occupy. "What's your name?" he asked, still in that quiet, dangerous tone. Amara?" she stammered. "Amara Bennett." "Amara," he repeated, testing the name in his mouth like he was tasting something unfamiliar. "American?" "Yes. Well, I'm here on exchange from Howard University. I'm studying Korean language and culture. I've been here 6 months. I didn't mean to—" "You're fired," Mr. Park interrupted in Korean, his voice shaking. "Get your things and leave. Now." But the man held up one hand, a simple gesture that somehow commanded absolute authority. Mr. Park fell silent mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. "No," the man said, still looking at Amara with those calculating eyes. "She keeps her job." He reached into his jacket, and every muscle in Amara's body tensed, but he only pulled out a sleek black wallet. He extracted several bills, more money than Amara made in a week, and set them on the table. "For the dry cleaning, and for the coffee I didn't get to drink." He turned to leave, his companions falling into formation around him like a protective detail. But as he passed Amara, he paused, leaning close enough that only she could hear his next words. "You laughed at Kang Jae-min," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "Nobody does that and walks away unchanged. I'll be seeing you again, Amara Bennett." Then he was gone, striding toward the exit with his entourage, leaving a trail of coffee drips and stunned silence in his wake. The door chimed as they left, and only then did the cafe seem to exhale, conversations resuming in hushed, urgent tones. Amara stood trembling, the empty tray still clutched in her white-knuckled grip, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Around her, she could hear whispers in Korean, could feel the stares of every patron, could sense Mr. Park's fury radiating from beside her. But all she could think about was the way he'd said her name, the dark promise in his voice, the certainty in his words. "I'll be seeing you again." The next 3 days passed in a haze of anxiety that settled over Amara like a suffocating blanket. She went through the motions of her life, teaching English to bored teenagers at the language academy in Gangnam, serving coffee at Cafe Aria with hands that occasionally trembled when she remembered the weight of Kang Jae-min's gaze, studying Korean grammar until the characters blurred together on the page. But underneath every mundane activity, a current of unease thrummed through her veins. Mr. Park had pulled her aside after Jae-min left, his face oscillating between fury and fear, in a way that would have been comical if Amara hadn't been so shaken. He'd grabbed her by both shoulders, his fingers digging into her flesh through her uniform, and spoken in rapid Korean that she only half understood. Something about being careful, about not knowing what she'd gotten herself into, about powerful men and dangerous games. Then he'd thrust a wad of cash into her hands, more than her usual weekly pay, and told her to take the rest of the day off. She'd walked home through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul in a daze, the money clutched in her fist, replaying the encounter over and over. The way Jaemin had looked at her, like she was something curious and unexpected. The way he'd smiled, if that slight curve of his lips could even be called a smile. The promise in his voice. "I'll be seeing you again." That night, Amara had done what any reasonable person would do when confronted with a threatening stranger in a foreign country. She'd Googled him. The search results had made her blood run cold. Kang Jae-min, 28 years old, heir to the Kang family empire. But the empire wasn't built on legitimate business, though there were plenty of legal fronts. Construction companies, real estate developments, restaurants, and nightclubs scattered throughout Seoul. Beneath the veneer of respectability, the articles spoke in carefully worded language about alleged connections to organized crime, about suspected involvement in everything from drug trafficking to protection rackets. There were photos of him at charity galas, always in expensive suits, always surrounded by other wealthy men, always with that same cold expression that suggested he was merely tolerating the presence of others. One article, from a smaller, more sensationalist news site, included a grainy photo of him leaving a nightclub with blood on his knuckles. The headline read, "Kang family heir linked to businessman's disappearance." Below it, details about a rival developer who'd been found in the Han River 3 weeks after trying to outbid the Kang family on a prime piece of Gangnam real estate. Amara had closed her laptop and spent the rest of the night staring at her ceiling, unable to sleep. Now, on her 4th day back at work, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It started as she left her apartment building in Mapo-gu that morning, a prickling sensation at the base of her skull that made her turn around twice on her walk to the subway station. But the street behind her was empty, just the usual morning crowd of commuters and students heading to their daily obligations. On the subway, packed with bodies pressed together in uncomfortable proximity, she felt it again. Eyes on her, heavy and assessing. She'd turned, scanning the faces around her, but everyone was absorbed in their phones or lost in their own thoughts, nobody paying her any attention at all. By the time she arrived at the language academy, Amara had convinced herself she was being paranoid. The encounter with Jae-min had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, and now she was seeing threats in every shadow. She forced herself to focus on her classes, on conjugating verbs and correcting pronunciation, on being present for her students who were paying good money to learn English from a native speaker. Her last class of the day was with a group of teenagers preparing for their university entrance exams. They were a rowdy bunch, more interested in gossiping and checking their phones than learning the finer points of English grammar. Amara was in the middle of explaining the difference between affect and effect for the 3rd time when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. The academy had strict rules about phones during class time, rules that applied to teachers as much as students. But it buzzed again, and again, and again, in rapid succession that suggested someone was very intent on reaching her. "Excuse me for one moment," Amara said in Korean, her accent still heavy but understandable. She pulled out her phone, intending to quickly silence it, but the notifications on her screen made her freeze. Unknown number. 6 text messages, all received in the last 2 minutes. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked her phone and opened the messages, her students chattering behind her, taking advantage of her distraction to pull out their own devices. The first message was a photo. Amara stared at it, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. It was her, walking to the subway station that morning, her bag slung over her shoulder, her expression focused and unaware. The photo had been taken from across the street, zoomed in with perfect clarity. The second message was another photo. Her on the subway, pressed between other commuters, her hand gripping the overhead rail, her eyes distant. The third was her entering the language academy, pulling open the glass door. Someone had been following her all day, documenting her movements, watching her. The fourth message was text. You looked nervous this morning. Were you thinking about me? The fifth. You should have been. The sixth. I told you I'd be seeing you again. Tonight. 8 p.m. The address is below. Below the message was a location pin, somewhere in Itaewon, one of Seoul's most expensive neighborhoods. And below that, a final line that made Amara's stomach drop. Don't make me come find you. I'm not as patient as I seem. Amara's vision blurred at the edges. She gripped the desk in front of her, her knuckles going pale with the force of it. Behind her, she could hear her students' concerned murmurs, someone asking in Korean if she was okay, if she needed to sit down. Class is dismissed, she managed to say, her voice coming out strangled and wrong. Early dismissal. Go, please. The students exchanged glances, confused but not about to argue with unexpected free time. They gathered their things with the chaos of teenagers suddenly released from obligation, flooding out of the classroom in a river of chatter and laughter. Within minutes, Amara was alone in the empty room, staring at her phone, at the photos of herself that she hadn't known were being taken, at the address pulsing on her screen like a beacon or a threat. Her first instinct was to run, to grab her things, go straight to her apartment, pack a bag, and get on the first flight back to the States. To disappear before Kang Jae-min could make good on whatever dark intentions those messages implied. But even as the thought formed, she knew it was impossible. She had no money for a last-minute international flight. Her visa was good for another 6 months. She had students depending on her, bills to pay, a life she'd built here even if it was small and precarious. And something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely, a dangerous curiosity that whispered in the back of her mind. What did he want? Why her? Out of all the people in Seoul, all the women who must throw themselves at a man with his wealth and power and dangerous magnetism, she was nobody, just a foreign student trying to make rent, a girl who'd accidentally spilled coffee and nervously laughed at the wrong moment. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. I can see you thinking about running. Don't. We need to talk, Amara. Just talk. I'm not going to hurt you. The use of her name, casual and familiar, sent a shiver down her spine. How was he watching her right now? Was there a camera in the classroom? Was someone stationed outside the building with binoculars or a telephoto lens? Another message. 7:55 p.m. The clock is ticking. Amara looked up at the classroom clock. It was 6:47 p.m. She had just over an hour to decide whether to walk into whatever trap Kang Jae-min was setting, or to ignore him and hope that a man who commanded enough power to have her followed all day would simply give up and leave her alone. She knew which option was more likely. With shaking hands, she gathered her things, shoved her laptop into her bag, and left the language academy. The streets of Gangnam were packed with the evening crowd, office workers flooding out of buildings, students heading to Hagwons for additional tutoring, couples window shopping at the luxury boutiques that lined the wide boulevards. Amara moved through them like a ghost, her mind racing. She should tell someone. But who? The police. She could imagine how that conversation would go. Yes, officer. A wealthy man sent me text messages asking to meet. No, he hasn't explicitly threatened me. Yes, I'm aware this sounds like I'm overreacting. The Korean police were notoriously uninterested in crimes that didn't leave bodies or significant property damage. And if Jae-min really was connected to organized crime the way the articles suggested, going to the police might just make things worse. Her friends back home? But what could they do from across the ocean except worry? and Amara had carefully cultivated an image in her messages home, posting photos of temple visits and cherry blossoms, talking about her students and Korean barbecue, never mentioning the loneliness or the exhaustion or the way she sometimes felt like she was drowning in a country where she would never quite belong. She couldn't shatter that illusion now with tales of mafia heirs and stalking. By the time Amara emerged from the subway at Itaewon Station, it was 7:42 p.m. The neighborhood was alive with its usual chaotic energy, a mix of international restaurants and bars catering to the area's large expat population, and the Koreans who came here to pretend they were somewhere else. American soldiers from the nearby base mingled with Korean hipsters and foreign English teachers. Street vendors sold kebabs and tacos and other food that would never appear in a traditional Korean restaurant. Amara checked her phone. The address Jae-min had sent was a 10-minute walk from the station, up one of the steep hills that Itaewon was famous for. She started walking, her legs feeling disconnected from her body, like she was watching herself from a distance making this monumentally stupid decision. The address led her to a building that didn't quite fit Itaewon's eclectic chaos. It was sleek and modern, all glass and steel, with a discreet entrance guarded by a security desk. Through the glass doors, Amara could see a minimalist lobby, expensive art on the walls, the kind of place where penthouse apartments probably cost more than she'd earn in her entire lifetime. She checked her phone again. 7:53 p.m. If she was going to turn back, it had to be now. But even as the thought formed, the glass door swung open. One of the men who'd been with Jae-min at the cafe stepped out, the younger one with bleached hair and ear piercings. Up close, he looked even more dangerous, with cold eyes that assessed her like a predator sizing up prey. "Miss Bennett," he said in English, his accent thick but understandable. "Right on time. The boss appreciates punctuality." He held the door open, a gesture that was somehow both polite and threatening. "This way, please." Amara's feet moved forward as if pulled by invisible strings. She stepped into the lobby, feeling the security guard's eyes track her movement. The bleached-haired man led her to a private elevator, using a key card to access it. The doors slid open with a soft chime. "Top floor," he said, pressing the button for the penthouse level. "The boss is waiting." Then he stepped back, leaving Amara alone in the elevator as the doors closed. The floor numbers climbed steadily, and with each passing floor, Amara's heart rate increased. By the time the elevator reached the penthouse and the doors opened with another soft chime, she was practically hyperventilating. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that was more like something from a luxury magazine than a place where actual people lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline, the city spreading out in every direction like a galaxy of lights. The interior was all clean lines and expensive furniture, abstract art on the walls that probably cost 6 figures each, a kitchen with appliances that looked like they belonged in a restaurant rather than a home. And standing by the windows, backlit by the city lights, was Kang Jae-min. He'd changed from his coffee-stained suit into something more casual, though casual for him apparently meant black slacks that fit perfectly and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were more muscular than Amara would have expected. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it, and it made him look younger, more human, though no less dangerous. He turned when he heard the elevator, and that slight smile curved his lips again. "Amara," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like he'd been practicing it. "You came. I wasn't entirely sure you would." "You didn't give me much choice," Amara said, her voice steadier than she felt. She stayed near the elevator, ready to bolt if necessary. "You had someone following me all day, taking pictures. That's stalking. That's illegal." "Is it?" Jae-min poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than her rent, holding one out to her in invitation. "I prefer to think of it as ensuring your safety. Seoul can be dangerous for young women alone, especially foreign women who don't speak the language well. I can take care of myself. Can you? He set the wineglass down on the coffee table between them when she didn't move to take it. You've been in Seoul for 6 months, Amara. You work 2 jobs to afford a studio apartment in one of the cheaper neighborhoods. You send money home to your mother every month, even though you can barely afford your own expenses. You have no friends here, no support network, nobody who would notice if you disappeared for a few days. The casual recitation of facts about her life, details he shouldn't know, made Amara's blood run cold. How do you know all that? I make it my business to know things about people who interest me. Jaemin walked closer, moving with that same predatory grace she'd noticed at the cafe. And you, Amara Bennett, interest me very much. Why? The question burst out of her. Why me? I spilled coffee on you and laughed. That's it. That's all that happened. I'm nobody, just a student trying to get by. There's nothing interesting about me. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin slightly. You really don't know, do you? His voice was soft, almost wondering. You really don't see it. See what? That you looked at me like I was just a man, Jaemin said simply. Not Kang Jaemin, heir to the Kang family. Not someone to fear or flatter or manipulate. Just a man who'd gotten coffee spilled on him, and your first instinct wasn't terror or calculation. It was laughter. Genuine, spontaneous, completely unfiltered laughter. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with his fingertips. The contact sent electricity through her entire body. Do you know how rare that is in my world, Amara? Do you know how long it's been since someone has reacted to me with anything real? Amara's breath caught in her throat. This close, she could see details she'd missed at the cafe. The faint scar on his left eyebrow, barely visible. The way his dark eyes weren't completely black, but held flecks of amber in their depths. The tension in his jaw, like he was holding himself back from something. You're trying to scare me, she whispered. I'm trying to be honest with you. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. The touch gentle despite the calluses she could feel on his skin. I could lie, play games, pretend to be something I'm not. But you'd see through it eventually. You saw through me from the first moment. I don't understand what you want from me. Neither do I yet, Jaemin admitted, and there was something vulnerable in his voice that caught Amara off guard. I just know that I can't stop thinking about you. That laugh of yours, it's been in my head for 3 days. The way you looked at me. Like I was absurd, rather than terrifying. I need to understand it. I need to understand you. His hand slid to the back of her neck, and Amara knew she should pull away, should run, should do anything except stand here, letting a dangerous man touch her like she was something precious. But her body wouldn't cooperate, frozen by the intensity of his gaze and the warmth of his hand and the intoxicating scent of his cologne. Tell me to stop, Jaemin murmured, leaning closer. Tell me you want nothing to do with me, that you'll scream if I come near you again, and I'll let you walk out of here. I'll never contact you again. You'll be just another face in Seoul, anonymous and safe. But Amara couldn't make the words come out. Because as terrifying as this was, as dangerous as she knew Kang Jaemin was, there was something magnetic about him too. Something in the way he looked at her like she was a mystery he needed to solve, like she mattered in a way that nothing else in his carefully controlled world did. I can't, she finally whispered. I can't tell you that. Jaemin's smile widened, and this time it reached his eyes, transforming his face from coldly handsome to devastating. Good, he said simply, because I wasn't ready to let you go yet. The next 2 weeks passed in a surreal blur that left Amara questioning her sanity and every decision that had led her to this point. Kang Jae-min inserted himself into her life with the inevitability of a force of nature, appearing at moments when she least expected him, and most needed to maintain the illusion that her existence was normal and manageable. He was there when she finished her shift at Cafe Aria, leaning against a black Mercedes with the casual elegance of someone who'd never questioned his right to occupy any space he chose. He drove her home despite her protests. The car's leather interior and whisper-quiet engine, a stark contrast to the crowded subway trains she usually took. During those rides, they talked about nothing and everything: her classes at university, her students at the language academy, the culture shock of navigating Seoul as a black woman in a country that still wasn't entirely comfortable with visible difference. Jae-min listened with an intensity that made her feel like every word mattered, like he was cataloging each detail about her and storing it away for future reference. He asked questions that demonstrated he'd been paying attention, remembering small things she'd mentioned in passing. The way she missed her mother's cooking, the specific cadence of collard greens and cornbread, and the Sunday dinners that had structured her childhood. How she'd chosen Korea for her exchange program, partly because it was as far from everything familiar as she could get. A clean break from expectations and the weight of being the first in her family to attend university. In return, he offered glimpses of himself, carefully curated pieces that felt significant, even as Amara suspected he was holding back the darker truths. He talked about the pressure of being an only son in a family where legacy was everything, where every action was scrutinized and judged against impossible standards set by generations of men who'd built their power on foundations Amara didn't want to examine too closely. He spoke about the isolation of his position, how trust was a luxury he couldn't afford when everyone wanted something from him. "People look at me and see opportunity," he'd said one night, as they sat in his car outside her apartment building, the engine running to keep the heat going against November's chill. "An opportunity for advancement, for wealth, for power. They see what I can give them, what I can do for them. Nobody just sees Jae-min." "What would they see if they did?" Amara had asked, genuinely curious despite the voice in her head, screaming that she was getting too close, asking too much, letting herself care about someone who existed in a world where caring was weakness. He'd looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his carefully controlled expression had cracked just slightly. "Someone tired," he'd admitted quietly. "Someone who didn't choose this life but was born into it, and now can't imagine any other way of existing. Someone who's done things that would make you run away screaming if you knew the details." "Try me," Amara had challenged, the reckless part of her that had laughed at him in the cafe surfacing despite her better judgment. But he'd just shaken his head, that slight smile curving his lips. "Not yet. You're not ready to know that part of me yet. And I'm not ready for you to look at me differently." That conversation had been a week ago, and since then, the temperature between them had been steadily rising. The touches became more frequent, more lingering. His hand on the small of her back as he guided her into restaurants so expensive they didn't have prices on the menus, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her coffee, their hands lingering together around the cup. The way he'd tuck a stray curl behind her ear when they talked, his touch gentle despite the calluses and the violence those hands had surely enacted. Amara knew she was in dangerous territory. Every article she'd read, every whispered conversation she'd overheard at the cafe when people thought she didn't understand Korean well enough to catch the gist of their warnings, they all pointed to the same conclusion. Kang Jae-min was not someone you got involved with unless you were prepared for the consequences, and the consequences were rarely good for anyone who wasn't born into his world. But knowing and caring were two different things, and Amara was rapidly discovering that her capacity for self-preservation had limits when confronted with the way Jae-min looked at her, like she was something precious and rare, like she was the one person in Seoul who saw him as human, rather than monster. It was her co-worker at the cafe, Min-ji, who finally voiced what everyone else was thinking. They were in the back room during a break, Min-ji smoking a cigarette by the partially open door despite the no-smoking policy. She'd been watching Amara with increasingly concerned eyes for days, and finally, she couldn't hold back anymore. "You need to be careful," Minji said in slow, careful Korean that Amara could follow. "Kang Jae-min is dangerous. Not just powerful, dangerous. There are rumors about what happens to women who get close to him." "What kind of rumors?" Amara asked, though part of her didn't want to know, wanted to maintain the bubble of willful ignorance she'd been carefully constructing. Minji took a long drag of her cigarette, her eyes distant. "A few years ago, there was a woman. Beautiful, from what I heard. University student like you, though Korean. She caught his attention, started seeing him. For a while, it seemed fine. He was generous, protective, gave her gifts, took her places." She paused, flicking ash out the door. Then she tried to leave him. Decided she wanted a normal life, a normal boyfriend, someone without blood on his hands. They found her car crashed on a mountain road 3 weeks later. Officially ruled an accident, but nobody who knew the situation believed it. Amara's blood ran cold. "You're saying he killed her?" "I'm saying that Kang Jae-min doesn't let go of things he considers his. And I'm saying you should be very, very careful about becoming something he decides he owns." That conversation haunted Amara through her next shift, through her evening classes, through another late-night car ride with Jae-min, where they drove aimlessly through Seoul's neon-lit streets. She studied his profile in the dashboard lights, the sharp angles of his face, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with the same controlled precision he applied to everything. "Tell me about your family," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Jaemin glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. "My family? Your father. The Kang family legacy you talked about. What's it like growing up knowing you're heir to an empire?" Something shuddered in his expression, the brief openness disappearing behind his usual mask. "You don't want to know about my family, Amara." "Yes, I do. If we're going to keep doing whatever this is, I need to know what I'm getting into." He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he pulled the car over to the side of the road, somewhere in Gangnam where the buildings reached toward the sky like glass and steel fingers, and turned to face her fully. "My father is a monster," he said flatly. Not metaphorically, not in the way people use that word when they mean someone is cruel or difficult. Literally a monster who built his power on blood and fear and the broken bodies of anyone who stood in his way. Amara's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. "I watched him kill a man when I was 12, Jaemin continued, his eyes fixed on something beyond the windshield, lost in memory. One of our own people, someone who'd been with the family for 20 years. He made a mistake, lost a shipment that was worth millions. My father called a meeting, had everyone gather in the warehouse where we did business. Then he made me watch while he beat that man to death with a baseball bat." He turned back to Amara, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it made her chest ache. "After, he told me that was the price of loyalty, the price of mistakes in our world. He said I needed to understand it, to internalize it, because someday I'd be the one making those decisions. Making those calls, being the monster." "You're not your father," Amara said quietly. "Aren't I?" Jaemin's laugh was bitter. "I've killed people, Amara. Not many, not as many as he has, but enough. I've ordered beatings, authorized kidnappings, made decisions that ruined lives because it was good for business or necessary to maintain our position. I've done everything he trained me to do, been everything he wanted me to be. How am I not him?" "Because you question it," Amara said, reaching across the center console to take his hand. "Because you're telling me this, warning me about what you are. Your father wouldn't do that. He wouldn't care." Jaemin stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. "You should run from me, Amara. You should get on a plane back to the States and forget you ever met me. I'm not good for you. I'm not good for anyone. Probably, Amara agreed. But I'm still here. Why? The question was almost desperate. Why aren't you terrified? Why aren't you running? It was a question Amara had been asking herself, turning over and over in her mind during sleepless nights in her small apartment. The rational answer was that she should be running, should put as much distance between herself and Kang Jae-min as possible. But rationality had stopped applying the moment she'd laughed at him in that cafe and seen something flicker in his cold eyes, something human and unexpected. Because when you look at me, she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, I don't feel invisible. In this city, in this country, I'm always the foreigner, the outsider, the one who doesn't quite fit. People either stare at me like I'm an exotic curiosity or look through me like I'm not quite real. But you see me, Jaemin. Actually see me. Not just the surface, but everything underneath. And that's addictive in a way I wasn't prepared for. His hand tightened around hers, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You're the first real thing I've had in years, he admitted. Everything else in my life is calculated, measured, strategic. Every interaction has an agenda. Every relationship serves a purpose. But you're just you. No agenda, no calculation, just honest reactions and terrible jokes and that laugh that I can't get out of my head. He raised their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent electricity racing through her veins. You're dangerous to me, Amara. More dangerous than any rival family or police investigation or power play. Because you make me want things I can't have. Things that don't exist in my world. Like what? Like normal. Like waking up next to someone who isn't afraid of me. Like having conversations that don't involve codes and careful words because we assume we're being recorded. Like being just Jae-min instead of the Kang heir. His eyes met hers, and the vulnerability in them took her breath away. Like being someone worthy of you. Before Amara could respond, before she could tell him that maybe he already was, or that she wasn't as worthy as he seemed to think, his phone buzzed with an urgency that made him curse in Korean. He checked the screen, and she watched his entire demeanor shift in an instant. The vulnerable man who'd been sharing his secrets disappeared, replaced by the cold crime lord she'd first met. I have to go, he said tersely, already starting the car. There's a situation I need to handle. What kind of situation? The kind you don't want to know about. He pulled back into traffic with aggressive precision, driving too fast through Seoul's late-night streets. I'm taking you home. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive, the silence heavy with unspoken words and the tension radiating from Jaemin's rigid posture. When they reached her apartment building, he didn't park, just pulled up to the curb with the engine running. Go inside, he said, not looking at her. Lock your doors. Don't leave until morning. Jaemin, what's happening? Just do what I say, Amara. Please. Finally, he looked at her, and the coldness in his eyes made her shiver. This was the man others feared, the heir who'd been trained since childhood to make impossible decisions. And don't call me tonight. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see on the news, don't call me. I'll contact you when it's safe. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, but something in his expression told her this wasn't the time. So she nodded, grabbed her bag, and got out of the car. She'd barely closed the door before he was pulling away, the Mercedes disappearing into Seoul's nighttime traffic like a black ghost. Amara stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching the space where his car had been, feeling the absence like a physical thing. Then she went inside, climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, and did exactly what he'd told her to do. She locked her doors, double-checked the windows, and tried to pretend she wasn't terrified about what kind of situation required that level of security precaution. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay in bed with her phone clutched in her hand, scrolling through Korean news sites with the help of translation apps, looking for anything that might explain Jae-min's sudden departure. Around 3 a.m., she found it. A breaking news report about a fire at a warehouse in Incheon, the building owned by a company with suspected ties to a rival crime family. 3 people confirmed dead, several others hospitalized with severe burns. Police suspected arson but had no suspects. Amara stared at the article, at the grainy photos of emergency responders and flames lighting up the night sky, and tried not to think about where Jae-min was right now. Tried not to imagine what handling the situation meant in his world. Tried not to wonder if those 3 dead people were on his conscience, or if he'd long since stopped counting bodies. Her phone buzzed with a text just as the first light of dawn was creeping through her window. From Jae-min. It's done. I'm okay. I'm sorry you were worried. Another message followed immediately. Thank you for not running yet. I know you will eventually, but thank you for not doing it tonight. Amara stared at the messages, her exhausted brain struggling to formulate a response. What did you say to a man who apologized for making you worry while he was potentially committing arson and murder? How did you reconcile the gentle way he touched her face with hands that might have killed people hours ago? She typed and deleted several responses before settling on the simplest truth. I'm still here. His reply came instantly. I know. That terrifies me more than anything else in my world. Sleep, Amara. I'll see you tonight. And despite everything, despite the warnings and the danger and the very rational voice in her head, screaming that she was making the worst mistake of her life, Amara felt herself smile at the promise in those words. She was definitely going to hell, but apparently, she was going there willingly. The warehouse fire in Incheon marked a turning point Amara wasn't prepared for. In the days that followed, she noticed changes in Jae-min's behavior. Subtle shifts that wouldn't have been apparent to anyone who didn't know him well. But she was starting to know him well, better than she probably should, and the changes worried her. He was more careful with her, more protective in ways that felt less like affection, and more like someone securing a valuable asset. The black Mercedes was always waiting after her shifts, but now it was accompanied by a second car that followed at a discreet distance. When she questioned him about it, Jae-min had simply said that tensions were escalating with rival families, that he couldn't afford to leave her unprotected. What does that mean, tensions escalating? Amara had asked, her stomach knotting with anxiety. They'd been in his penthouse, the city lights of Seoul spreading below them like a glittering carpet. Jae-min stood by the windows as he often did, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His reflection overlaid on the cityscape like a ghost haunting his own life. It means that the warehouse wasn't just about territory or money, he'd said quietly. It was about sending a message. The Song family thinks they can move into areas we've controlled for 20 years. They needed to understand that actions have consequences. The 3 people who died, Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Were they innocent? Jae-min's reflection showed no expression. There's no such thing as innocent in my world, Amara. There are only varying degrees of complicity. Those 3 were Song enforcers, men who'd done their own share of violence. I didn't order anyone killed, just the warehouse burned. What happened after that was their choice to stay and fight the fire instead of running. That's a distinction without a difference. Perhaps. He turned to face her, his dark eyes unreadable. Does it matter? Does it change how you see me? It should have, Amara knew. It should have been the wake-up call she needed to walk away, to recognize that no amount of gentle touches and vulnerable confessions could erase the fact that Kang Jae-min operated in a world where human lives were currency, where violence was just another business transaction. But when she looked at him, all she could see was the man who listened to her rambling stories about her students with genuine interest, who remembered that she took her coffee with 2 sugars and oat milk, who held her hand like she was something precious. I don't know, she'd admitted. I don't know what to think anymore. Then don't think. He'd crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that felt new and frightening. Just be here with me, for however long we have before reality crashes down, and you remember why this is impossible. That had been a week ago, and since then, Amara felt like she was existing in two parallel worlds. In one world, she was still the struggling exchange student, teaching English to teenagers and serving coffee to Seoul's wealthy elite, sending cheerful messages home to her mother about Korean culture and temple visits. In the other world, she was the woman who'd somehow captured the attention of a crime lord, who spent her evenings in penthouses drinking wine that cost more than her monthly rent, who was learning to recognize the weight of a gun concealed under expensive suit jackets and the careful dance of coded conversations when business associates called. The two worlds collided catastrophically on a Thursday evening in early December. Amara had just finished her shift at Cafe Aria and was heading toward the door, looking forward to the car ride with Jae-min that had become the highlight of her days, when she heard her name called in Korean. She turned to find Minji rushing toward her, her face flushed and anxious. "Amara, wait, please. I need to talk to you." They stepped outside together, into the cold December air that smelled of roasting chestnuts from a nearby street vendor. Minji pulled out a cigarette with shaking hands, took a long drag, and then fixed Amara with an intense stare. "He's not coming tonight," Minji said without preamble. "What? How do you know?" "Because the cafe got a call an hour ago. Anonymous. But the person told Mr. Park to make sure you got home safely tonight, that there might be trouble in the area." Minji took another drag, her eyes darting nervously to the street. "That call came from someone in the Kang organization. They're protecting you, Amara, which means something bad is about to happen." As if summoned by her words, Amara heard it. The screech of tires, too fast for Seoul's normally careful traffic. She turned just in time to see a black van careening around the corner, heading straight toward the cafe. Minji grabbed her arm, yanking her backward just as the van mounted the sidewalk where they'd been standing seconds before. The van's side door slid open, and Amara got a glimpse of men inside, their faces covered by black masks, their hands holding weapons she couldn't identify. Time seemed to slow, every detail becoming crystal clear. The neon signs reflecting off the van's dark paint, the sound of Minji's scream, the acrid smell of burned rubber from the tires. Then someone grabbed her from behind, arms wrapping around her waist and yanking her into the recessed doorway of a closed shop. She struggled instinctively, her elbow connecting with something solid that made her attacker grunt. But the grip didn't loosen, and a familiar voice hissed in her ear in English, "Stop fighting me. I'm here to protect you." It was the bleached-haired man from Jaemin's entourage, the one who'd brought her to the penthouse that first night. His name was Kim Tae-young, she'd learned, Jaemin's most trusted lieutenant, and the closest thing he had to a friend. The van's occupants opened fire, not at the cafe, but at a car that had just pulled up at the corner. A car Amara recognized, the black Mercedes that was supposed to be picking her up. Bullets shattered the windshield, and she watched in horror as the driver, one of Jae-min's men she'd seen but never spoken to, slumped forward over the steering wheel. "Move," Tae-yang commanded, pulling her deeper into the doorway as the shooting continued. His body shielded hers, and she could feel the tension in his muscles, coiled and ready for violence. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't think. Just run. There's a safe house 3 blocks from here. You'll be protected there until the boss can come get you." "What's happening?" Amara's voice came out high and panicked, nothing like her usual controlled tone. "Why are they shooting? Who are those people?" "Song family," Tae-yang said grimly. "They're escalating. They know about you, about how much the boss cares. You're a target now, Miss Bennett. A way to hurt him." The shooting stopped as abruptly as it had started. The van peeled away, leaving behind the damaged Mercedes and a scatter of shell casings on the pavement. People were screaming, running, pulling out phones to call the police. In the distance, sirens already wailed, responding with the speed that only happened in Gangnam, where wealthy citizens' safety was a priority. "Now," Tae-yang said, and then they were running. Amara had never run so fast in her life. Her lungs burned with the cold December air, her legs pumping as Tae-yang pulled her through a maze of back alleys and side streets she'd never known existed. Behind them, she could hear shouts, footsteps, the unmistakable sound of pursuit. They burst out onto a wider street, and Taiyang shoved her toward a building that looked like any other Seoul apartment complex. But when he pressed a code into the entrance panel and the door clicked open, Amara caught a glimpse of security cameras and reinforced locks that suggested this was anything but ordinary. Up 4 flights of stairs, moving so fast Amara's vision was starting to blur at the edges. Another coded lock, another door swinging open. Then she was inside, and Taiyang was securing multiple locks behind them, his movements efficient and practiced. The apartment was small but well-equipped, with blackout curtains over the windows, and a layout that suggested it was designed specifically as a safe house. There was a kitchenette stocked with non-perishable food, a bathroom with medical supplies visible in an open cabinet, a main room with minimal furniture. And sitting on the couch, a gun in his lap, and his face pale with barely controlled fury, was Kang Jae-min. He stood the moment he saw her, the gun forgotten as he crossed the room in long strides. Then his hands were on her face, his eyes scanning her for injuries with an intensity that made her breathless. "Are you hurt?" His English was clipped, accent thickening with emotion. "Did they touch you? Did any of them get close?" "I'm fine," Amara managed, though she was shaking so badly her teeth were chattering. "Taiyang got to me first, but your driver, I know, I saw." Jae-min pulled her into his chest, his arms wrapping around her so tightly it was almost painful. She could feel his heart racing, feel the tremor in his hands that contradicted his controlled voice. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Amara. This is my fault. I should have seen this coming, should have protected you better." "Boss," Taeyang said quietly from near the door, "we need to decide our next move. The Song family knows about her now. This won't be the last attempt." Jae-min's arms tightened around Amara before he forced himself to release her and turn to his lieutenant. When he did, the vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by the cold strategist who'd inherited a criminal empire. "How many did we lose?" "Just park at the cafe. The rest of our people got out or weren't in the immediate area. But the Songs had good intel, boss. They knew exactly where she'd be and when." "We have a leak. Find it." Jaemin's voice was ice. "I don't care what you have to do or who you have to hurt. Find the leak and plug it. Permanently." Taeyang nodded and left, the locks clicking behind him. Then it was just Amara and Jae-min in the small safe house, the sound of their breathing loud in the sudden silence. "This is what your world looks like," Amara said, her voice steadier now that the immediate danger had passed. "People shooting at me in the street, men dying because they were in a car meant to pick me up, running through alleys like a fugitive." "Yes." Jae-min didn't try to deny it or soften the truth. "This is what it looks like when someone I care about becomes a target. This is what happens when my enemies find a weakness they can exploit." "I'm a weakness? You're everything." The rawness in his voice made her chest ache. "You're the only thing in my life that matters beyond power and survival and the fucking empire my father built on blood. And now they know it, and they'll use it against me. And I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't lose you, Amara. I won't survive it." She should run. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to get on a plane and never look back, to choose safety over whatever this was. But instead, she found herself crossing the small space between them, taking his face in her hands the way he so often did to her, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Then don't lose me," she said. "Fight for me. Protect me. Do whatever you have to do, but don't give up, because I'm not running, Jae-min. Not anymore." His kiss was desperate, consuming, like he was trying to pour all his fear and fury and impossible feelings into the connection between their mouths. Amara kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even though there was no closer to get. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Jamin rested his forehead against hers. "You're insane," he whispered. "You should be on the first flight back to America." "Probably," Amara agreed. "But I'm still here. Why?" It was the same question he'd asked before, but this time the context had changed, weighted with danger and gunshots, and the very real possibility that staying with him might get her killed. "Because that laugh you can't forget," Amara said. "That moment when I saw you as just a man instead of a monster. You've given me something too. You've made me feel seen, valued, like I matter beyond being a means to an end. And I'm not ready to give that up yet, even if keeping it might kill me." Jamin's laugh was broken, painful. "You're going to destroy me, Amara Bennett." "Good," she said, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. "Because you've already destroyed any chance I had at a normal life. Might as well make it mutual." They stayed in the safe house for 3 days, while Jamin's organization worked to identify the leak and neutralize the immediate threat from the Song family. 3 days that felt like existing outside of time, cut off from the normal world. They talked for hours, sharing stories and fears and dreams that neither of them had voiced to anyone else. Jamin told her about the pressure of living up to impossible expectations, about the violence he'd witnessed and perpetrated, about the darkness that lived in his chest where other people had hearts. Amara told him about growing up as the first in her family to attend university, about the weight of expectations from a community that saw her success as collective success, about the loneliness of being smart and ambitious and black in spaces that weren't designed for her. She told him about her father who'd left when she was 6, about her mother's 3 jobs to put her through school, about the guilt she felt for running away to Korea instead of staying close to home. On the 3rd night, as they lay together on the safe house's narrow bed, fully clothed, but tangled in each other's arms, Jamin said quietly into the darkness, "After this is over, after we deal with the Song family, I'm sending you back to America." Amara stiffened in his arms. "What?" "Not forever," he said quickly, his grip tightening. "Just until things calm down, until I can guarantee your safety. 6 months, maybe a year. Then you can come back, finish your exchange program, and we can figure out what this is between us without you being a target. You can't just send me away like I'm a problem to be managed." "I'm not." He sat up, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Amara, they shot at you. They tried to kidnap you or kill you or whatever their plan was. The next time I might not be fast enough. Taeyang might not be there. You could die because of me." "So could you," Amara countered, sitting up to face him. "You could die because of your enemies or your business or any number of things that have nothing to do with me. Should I demand you leave your life behind for your own safety?" "That's different." "How? How is it different, Jamin?" "Because this is my world." The words burst out of him with a force that made her flinch. "This is what I was born into, what I was trained for. Violence and strategy and danger, it's in my blood. But you're an exchange student who should be worried about exams and internships and normal things that 23-year-old women worry about. You shouldn't be in safe houses hiding from people who want to hurt you to get to me." "But I am," Amara said quietly. "I'm already here, already involved. Sending me away won't change that. If the Song family knows about me now, they'll know about me whether I'm in Seoul or Washington, D.C. Distance won't protect me if they decide I'm worth pursuing." The truth of her words hung in the air between them. Jamin closed his eyes, and in the dim light filtering through the blackout curtains, he looked exhausted, defeated in a way she'd never seen him. "I don't know how to keep you safe," he admitted. "I don't know how to navigate this, how to have something real in a world built on lies and violence. I'm terrified every moment that I'm going to get you killed." Amara took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Then we figure it out together. Not by sending me away, not by pretending this isn't happening. Together, Jamin. We face whatever comes next together. His kiss was gentler this time, more reverent, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her lips and the taste of her mouth. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face, the first time she'd seen him cry. "You're going to be the death of me," he whispered. "Or your salvation," Amara replied. "We'll find out which." The revelation about the leak came faster than anyone expected. On the fourth day in the safe house, Tae Yang burst through the door with a grim expression that made Amara's stomach drop before he even spoke. "We found them," he said in English for Amara's benefit, his accent thick with barely controlled rage. "Boss, you need to see this." Jamin stood from where he'd been sitting beside Amara on the couch, instantly transforming into the cold leader she'd glimpsed during tense phone calls and coded conversations. "Show me." Tai Yang pulled out a tablet, swiping through images that Amara couldn't see from her angle, but that made Jamin's entire body go rigid. His hands clenched into fists, and when he spoke, his voice was devoid of all emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "When?" "We pulled him from his apartment 2 hours ago. He's being held at the warehouse in Yongsan, waiting for your orders." "Him?" Amara asked, her voice small in the suddenly oppressive atmosphere. "Who is it?" Jamin turned to her, and the coldness in his eyes made her shrink back instinctively. This wasn't the man who held her while she slept, or listened to her rambling stories about her students. This was the heir to a criminal empire. The man who'd been trained since childhood to make impossible decisions. The person she sometimes forgot existed beneath the gentle touches and vulnerable confessions. "Someone who's been with my family for 15 years, he said flatly. "Someone I trusted. Someone whose sister I paid to put through medical school, whose mother's cancer treatments I covered when his salary wasn't enough. Someone who sold you out to the Song family for 5 million won, and a promise of protection when everything fell apart." The betrayal in his voice was like acid, burning through his usual control. Amara stood, moving toward him instinctively, but he held up a hand that stopped her in her tracks. "I have to go handle this," Jamin said, his tone making it clear that handle was a euphemism for something dark and violent. "You'll stay here with 2 guards outside. Don't leave. Don't call anyone. Don't go near the windows. Understand?" "Jamin, wait. Do you understand?" The question came out harsh, commanding, allowing no room for argument. "Yes," Amara whispered. He left without another word, Taeyang following, leaving Amara alone with her racing thoughts and growing dread about what handling meant in Jamin's world. She'd known, abstractly, what he was capable of. She'd read the articles, heard the whispers, seen the careful way people moved around him like he was a predator who might strike at any moment. But knowing and witnessing were 2 entirely different things. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Amara tried to distract herself with her phone, scrolling through messages from her mother, asking how classes were going, from friends back home sharing memes and gossip that felt like they came from another planet. She couldn't bring herself to respond to any of them, couldn't figure out how to maintain the fiction of her normal life when she was hiding in a safe house, waiting for a crime lord to return from doing God knows what to someone who'd betrayed him. When Jamin finally returned, it was well past midnight. The locks clicked open, and he stepped inside, and Amara felt her breath catch at the sight of him. His expensive clothes were disheveled, his shirt partially untucked. There was blood on his hands, dark and damning in the safe house's harsh lighting. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to tell a story she didn't want to read. He saw her looking at the blood, and something flickered in his expression. Shame, maybe, or resignation. He walked to the kitchenette sink without a word, and began washing his hands with mechanical precision, scrubbing until his skin was red and the water ran clear. "Is he dead?" Amara heard herself ask, her voice sounding distant and strange to her own ears. No. Jamin dried his hands on a dish towel, still not looking at her. But he wishes he was. The casual way he said it, like discussing the weather rather than torture, made Amara's stomach turn. She'd known what he was, had thought she'd accepted it, but this was different. This was evidence written in blood on his hands, proof that the darkness he warned her about wasn't metaphorical. You tortured him. It wasn't a question. I did what was necessary to ensure this doesn't happen again. Finally, Jamin turned to face her, his expression carefully blank. He gave up everything. How much the Song family paid him, what information he provided, who else might be compromised. By the time I was done, I knew everything. And now? Now he serves as an example. Word is already spreading about what happens when you betray the Kang family. By morning, every organization in Seoul will know the price of disloyalty. Amara stared at him, at this man she'd laughed with and kissed, and imagined a future with, and felt reality crashing down around her. You're really him, she said quietly. The monster everyone warns about. I kept thinking there was more to you, that the gentle parts were real, and the violence was just necessity. But it's all you, isn't it? The tenderness and the torture, the vulnerability and the violence. You're not two different people. You're one person who contains all of it. Something cracked in Jamin's carefully maintained control. He crossed the room in quick strides, grabbing her arms gently despite the urgency in his movement. Yes, he said, his voice raw. Yes, I'm all of those things. I'm the man who holds you like you're precious, and the man who breaks fingers to get information. I'm the person who listens to your stories, and the person who orders executions. I'm both, Amara, and I've been trying to tell you that from the beginning. You wanted to know what my world looks like? This is it. Blood and strategy and impossible choices. This is what loving me means. Loving you? The words came out strangled. Is that what this is? Isn't it? Jamin's grip tightened fractionally, his eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. You think I bring women to safe houses? You think I trust anyone else with my secrets, with my fears, with the parts of me I've kept hidden since I was 12 years old watching my father beat a man to death? You're the only real thing in my life, Amara. The only thing that matters beyond survival and power. If that's not love, I don't know what is. Amara felt tears streaming down her face, though she hadn't realized she was crying. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough to love someone who hurts people, who makes decisions that end lives, who comes home with blood on his hands. I know. Jamin released her arms and stepped back, and the distance felt like a canyon opening between them. I know it's too much. I shouldn't have let this happen. Shouldn't have pursued you. Shouldn't have let myself care. But I did. And now we're here. And I can't take it back even though it's destroying both of us. What do we do? Amara asked helplessly. How do we move forward from this? Before Jamin could answer, his phone rang with the specific tone that Amara had learned meant urgent business. He answered it, his entire demeanor shifting back to cold efficiency as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When he hung up, his expression was grim. The Song family knows we found the leak, he said. They're accelerating their plans. Taiyang's intelligence suggests they're going to make a major move, something big enough to cripple our operations and establish their dominance. We have maybe 48 hours to prepare. What kind of move? An attack on one of our primary holdings, probably, or a hit on key family members. He ran his hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his stress despite his controlled voice. Which means I need to be strategic, focused, completely locked into protecting what's mine. And I'm a distraction. Amara finished for him. You're everything I can't afford to think about right now, Jamin corrected. Every second I spend worried about your safety is a second I'm not using to outmaneuver our enemies. Every moment I'm distracted by how much I want to keep you close is a moment I'm vulnerable. So what do you want me to do? He was silent for a long moment, conflict playing across his face. I want you to go back to your apartment, resume your normal life, pretend none of this happened. Let me handle the Song family, neutralize the threat, restore stability. Then maybe, when it's over, we can figure out if there's a way for us to exist in the same world. That's running away, Amara said. That's exactly what you said you didn't want me to do. I changed my mind. Jamin's voice was firm. This is different. This isn't about sending you to America for months. This is about giving you a few weeks of normalcy while I deal with enemies who wouldn't hesitate to hurt you to get to me. Please, Amara, let me do this without having to worry about you being collateral damage. Every part of her wanted to refuse, to insist on staying involved, to prove that she was strong enough to handle his world. But looking at the exhaustion in his eyes, the blood he'd washed off his hands, the weight of impossible decisions bearing down on him, Amara realized that sometimes strength meant knowing when to step back. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go home. I'll go to work and classes and pretend everything is normal. But Jamin? She waited until he met her eyes. When this is over, when the Song family is handled and you've done whatever you need to do, we're having a real conversation about what this is and whether it can work. No more deflecting. No more half-truths. Complete honesty, even if it destroys us. Even if it destroys us, he agreed. They left the safe house together just before dawn, Tae-young driving them through Seoul's empty streets in yet another black car. Jamin held Amara's hand the entire way, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture that had become familiar. Neither of them spoke, both lost in their own thoughts about impossible futures and dangerous presents. When they reached her apartment building in Mapogu, Jamin walked her to her door, despite Tae-young's obvious concern about the time they were wasting. At her threshold, he pulled her into a kiss that tasted like goodbye, and promises neither of them knew if they could keep. 2 weeks, he murmured against her lips. Give me 2 weeks to end this. Then we'll figure out the rest. 2 weeks, Amara agreed, though something in her chest was already screaming that 2 weeks was an eternity when you were in love with someone who lived on the knife's edge of violence. She watched from her window as his car pulled away, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Then she collapsed on her bed, still in the clothes she'd been wearing for 4 days, and let herself cry for the first time since the shooting at the cafe. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Amara's life. She went through the motions of normality with mechanical precision, teaching her classes, serving coffee, studying Korean grammar. But underneath the surface, she was constantly listening for news, constantly checking her phone for messages from Jamin that came less and less frequently as he got deeper into whatever war he was waging with the Song family. The news provided hints of what was happening. Reports of fires at warehouses across Seoul, arrests of businessmen with suspected criminal ties, a massive police raid on a nightclub in Gangnam that resulted in dozens of people being detained. Each headline made Amara's heart race, made her wonder if Jamin was safe, if he was winning or losing this invisible war. On day 12, her phone rang at 3 a.m. She answered it before fully waking, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Amara. Jamin's voice sounded rough, exhausted. I need you to listen carefully. Don't panic, but I need you to pack a bag right now. 1 suitcase, essentials only. Tae-young is coming to get you in 20 minutes. What? Why? What's happening? The Song family knows where you live. The words were clipped, urgent. They're planning something. We got intelligence an hour ago. I'm not taking chances with your safety. You're being moved to a more secure location until this is finished. Jaemin? Please, Amara. For once, just do what I'm asking without arguing. Pack your bag. Go with Taeyang. Trust me to keep you safe. The line went dead before she could respond. Amara sat in her dark apartment, her heart hammering, adrenaline flooding her system. Then she was moving, throwing clothes into a suitcase without really seeing what she was grabbing, collecting her passport and laptop and the few things that mattered. She was zipping up the suitcase when she heard it, the sound of breaking glass from somewhere below, followed by shouts in Korean she couldn't quite make out. They were already here. The sound of breaking glass galvanized Amara into action faster than any conscious thought could have. She grabbed her suitcase and her phone, adrenaline sharpening her senses to painful clarity. The shouts from below were getting louder, multiple voices, angry and commanding in rapid Korean that her sleep-fogged brain couldn't process, but her body understood meant danger. She ran to her apartment door and pressed her ear against it, listening. Footsteps on the stairs, heavy boots taking the steps multiple at a time. They were coming up, and they were coming fast. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, which meant she had maybe 30 seconds before they reached her. The window. Her mind raced through options even as her hands moved to the locks on her door, checking that they were secure, knowing it wouldn't matter if they really wanted in. The fire escape. She'd noticed it weeks ago. A rickety metal structure that ran down the back of the building. She'd never given it much thought beyond noting it as the kind of thing that would never pass safety codes back in the States. Now it might be her only way out. Amara ran to her bedroom window, yanking it open and immediately recoiling at the blast of freezing December air. The fire escape was there, exactly where she remembered, covered in a light dusting of snow that made it look even more treacherous than usual. Behind her, she heard the sound of her apartment door being kicked, the wood splintering under repeated impacts. She didn't let herself think. Thinking meant freezing, meant making calculations about how insane this was, how likely she was to fall and break her neck, trying to climb down a frozen fire escape in the middle of the night. Instead, she threw her suitcase out first, watching it tumble down the metal stairs with a series of crashes that she hoped would go unnoticed in the chaos. Then she climbed out the window. The metal was so cold it burned her hands even through her sleep shirt. Amara's fingers wrapped around the railing, and she forced herself to start descending, her feet slipping on the snow-covered steps. Behind her, she heard her apartment door give way with a final crash, heard voices shouting in Korean, heard footsteps thundering through her tiny space. She was halfway down when a face appeared at her window. A man, Korean, wearing all black with a face she didn't recognize. He saw her, and his eyes widened. He shouted something to his companions, then started to climb out the window after her. Amara abandoned any pretense of caution and jumped. She'd been on the 2nd floor landing of the fire escape, and the ground was maybe 8 feet below. She hit hard, her ankle twisting painfully as she landed in the alley behind her building. The impact knocked the breath out of her, stars exploding across her vision, but terror kept her moving. She grabbed her suitcase from where it had landed and ran. The alley was dark and narrow, barely wide enough for a single car. Amara sprinted toward the street, her twisted ankle screaming with each step, her breath coming in gasps that misted in the cold air. Behind her, she heard the man who'd followed her down the fire escape hit the ground with a grunt, heard him shouting to others. She burst out onto the main street of her Mapogu neighborhood, a street that was never entirely empty even at 3 a.m., but was still eerily quiet compared to daytime. A few late-night workers heading home, a drunk couple stumbling out of a bar, a convenience store clerk smoking outside his shop. They all turned to stare at the black woman in pajamas and a jacket, dragging a suitcase and running like her life depended on it. Because it did. A car screeched to a halt in front of her, and Amara's heart stopped, certain it was more of the Song family's people. But then the door flew open, and Taeyang was there, his face pale and furious. "Get in!" he shouted in English. Now, Miss Bennett! Amara threw herself and her suitcase into the back seat. Tae-yang was already accelerating before she'd even closed the door, the car fishtailing slightly on the icy road. In the rearview mirror, she could see men pouring out of her apartment building. 3 of them. No, 4. All dressed in black, all looking murderous. How did they find me? Amara gasped, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip her seatbelt. How did they know where I lived? We're still trying to figure that out, Tae-yang said grimly, taking a corner too fast and nearly sideswiping a parked car. The boss is going to lose his mind when he finds out they got this close to you. We were supposed to have eyes on your building, but something went wrong with our surveillance rotation. He was driving like a man possessed, weaving through Seoul's late-night traffic with aggressive precision. Amara watched the city blur past her window, neon signs and dark buildings and streetlights all mixing together into an incomprehensible stream. Her ankle throbbed, and she realized with distant surprise that she was crying, tears streaming down her face without any conscious decision to let them fall. Where are we going? She managed to ask. Somewhere safer. Somewhere the boss can actually protect you instead of having you sitting exposed in a neighborhood apartment with minimal security. Tae-yang's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. He's going to kill me for this. I was supposed to get to you before they did. You did get to me, Amara pointed out, her voice shaking. I'm here. I'm alive. That's what matters. But Tae-young just shook his head, and Amara understood. In Jae-min's world, alive wasn't good enough when the goal was completely safe and untouched. The fact that she'd had to escape down a fire escape, had nearly been caught, had been terrified and injured, that was a failure, even if the ultimate outcome was her survival. They drove for almost 40 minutes, heading away from central Seoul, toward the mountains that ringed the city. The roads became narrower, less populated, until finally, Tae-yang turned onto a private drive that wound up through dense forest. At the end of the drive was a house. Calling it a mansion felt inadequate, a sprawling modern structure of glass and stone that seemed to grow out of the mountainside itself. This is one of the family's private residences, Tae-yang explained as they pulled up to a garage that opened automatically. Only a handful of people know it exists. You'll be safe here. The garage door closed behind them, with a finality that made Amara feel like she was being sealed in a tomb. But then Tae-yang was helping her out of the car, taking her suitcase, guiding her through a door that led into the house's interior. Whatever Amara had been expecting, it wasn't this. The house was stunning, all clean lines and expensive furnishings, with floor-to-ceiling windows that during daylight would probably offer spectacular views of Seoul below. But it was also clearly lived in, with personal touches that suggested this wasn't just a showpiece. Books on shelves, art that looked chosen for love rather than investment, a kitchen that had actually been used. Whose house is this? Amara asked, as Tae-yang led her to a bedroom that was easily twice the size of her entire apartment. The boss's, he said simply. His personal residence, the place he comes when he needs to get away from family business. He wanted me to bring you here, so he knows exactly where you are, so he can control every aspect of your security. He set her suitcase down and turned to leave, then paused at the door. Miss Bennett, I know this is all insane. I know you didn't sign up for any of this. But for what it's worth, I've known the boss for 15 years. I've never seen him care about anyone the way he cares about you. He's going to end this war with the Song family, no matter what it costs him, because you're involved now, because they threatened you. What if I don't want him to end it because of me? Amara's voice was small. What if I don't want to be the reason for more violence? Tae-yang's smile was sad. You don't get a choice in that, Miss Bennett. None of us do. In our world, when someone threatens what's yours, you respond with overwhelming force. It's the only language anyone understands. He left, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Amara alone in Jaemin's bedroom with her racing thoughts and throbbing ankle. She limped to the window and looked out at the darkness, at the lights of Seoul spread below like a blanket of stars. and wondered how her life had gotten so impossibly complicated. She must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing Amara knew, she was being gently shaken awake. Her eyes flew open, her body tensing for danger, but it was Jae-min sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand on her shoulder, his face exhausted but relieved. "You're okay," he breathed, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "God, Amara, when Taeyang called and said they'd gotten to your apartment before he did, I thought..." His voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you." "I'm fine," Amara said, though her voice was muffled against his chest. "Scared and my ankle hurts, but fine." Jaemin pulled back immediately, his hands moving to examine her ankle with surprising gentleness. It was swollen. She could see that now in the morning light filtering through the windows, and the bruising was already starting to show. He touched it carefully, and she winced. "Not broken," he said after a moment, "but badly sprained. You need to keep ice on it and stay off it for a few days." He looked up at her, and the naked emotion in his eyes made her chest ache. "You jumped from the fire escape." "I didn't have much choice. They were breaking down my door." "You could have been killed. That fall could have broken your neck, or they could have caught you in the alley." His hands were shaking as they cradled her injured ankle. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Amara. This is my fault. I should have moved you somewhere secure days ago. I should have anticipated they'd escalate like this." "You're not psychic," Amara pointed out. "You can't predict everything." "I should have." The words came out fierce. "I should have protected you better. You're the most important thing in my world, and I nearly got you killed because I was trying to balance keeping you close with keeping you safe, and I failed at both." Amara took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me, Jaemin. What happened last night wasn't your fault. The Song family made a choice to come after me. They chose violence. That's on them, not you. But you're only a target because of me. And I'm only alive because of you," she countered. "Because you had Taeyang watching my building. Because you taught me to trust my instincts and run when I needed to. Yes, being with you is dangerous. I've known that from the beginning. But I'm still here. Still choosing this. Still choosing you." Something in Jaemin's expression cracked, and suddenly he was kissing her with a desperation that spoke of fear and relief and emotions too big to be contained. Amara kissed him back, ignoring the pain in her ankle, ignoring the logical part of her brain that pointed out this was insane, that she should be on a plane back to America, that loving this man might be the death of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jaemin rested his forehead against hers. "It's done," he said quietly. "The war with the Song family, it's finished." "What do you mean?" "I mean I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Full-scale war that would destroy both families and bring down so much police attention that we'd all end up in prison, or a negotiated peace that gives them face while making it clear that you are absolutely off-limits." He stroked her cheek with his thumb. "They chose peace. Smart of them." "Just like that?" Amara couldn't quite believe it. "After everything, they just agreed. After I demonstrated that I was willing to burn down everything I've built to protect you, yes, they agreed." Jaemin's smile was grim. "I took out 3 of their primary holdings in one night, Amara. I cost them hundreds of millions of won. I made it clear that every time they came near you, I would respond with disproportionate violence. Eventually, they did the math and realized you weren't worth the cost." The casual way he described destruction and violence made Amara's stomach turn, but she forced herself to look past it to the truth underneath. He had ended a war to keep her safe. He had risked everything, his reputation and his family's power, and possibly his life, because she mattered more. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Jaemin pulled back to look at her properly. Now we have the conversation you demanded. Complete honesty, even if it destroys us. So tell me, Amara Bennett, after everything you've seen, everything you know about me and my world, can you really imagine a future where this works, where we work? Amara was quiet for a long moment, really thinking about it. Not the fantasy version she'd been constructing in her head, where love somehow conquered all and made the violence palatable. The real version, where Kang Jae-min would always be heir to a criminal empire, would always make decisions that cost lives, would always exist in a world where danger was the norm rather than the exception. I don't know, she said finally, and watched something die in his eyes. Wait, let me finish. I don't know if we can make this work long term. I don't know if love is enough to bridge the gap between our worlds, your violence and my normal, your darkness and my light. But I know that I'm not ready to walk away yet. I know that when I thought those men were going to catch me last night, my first thought was that I'd never see you again. And that terrified me more than dying. She took his hands in hers, holding tight. So maybe we can't make forever work. Maybe this ends in disaster and heartbreak and regrets. But maybe we get a little while longer to figure it out. To see if there's a version of this where you can be both the man who runs a criminal empire and the man who holds me like I'm precious. Where I can love you while still holding on to the parts of myself that believe in kindness and law and doing the right thing. You want to try? Jae-min said slowly, like he couldn't quite believe it. After everything, you want to actually try to make this work. I want to try, Amara confirmed. No more hiding. No more pretending you're something you're not. You tell me the truth about what you do, and I'll decide if I can live with it. I'll probably make you explain yourself, probably challenge you on decisions I think are wrong. But I'll stay, at least for now. At least until we know for sure whether this is possible. Jae-min laughed, and it was the sound of wonder and disbelief mixed together. You're insane. You're absolutely insane. And you're going to drive me crazy, and you're probably going to get yourself killed loving me. Probably, Amara agreed. But at least I won't die wondering what could have been. He kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter, like he was savoring the moment. Like he couldn't quite believe she was real, and choosing him despite everything. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. I love you, he said simply. I don't know if I'm capable of the kind of love that normal people feel, the kind that's healthy and safe and good for you. But whatever I'm capable of, whatever this broken, violent heart can offer, it's yours. All of it, forever or until you finally come to your senses and run. I love you too, Amara whispered back, and felt the truth of it settle in her chest like a weight and a benediction. Even though you're going to drive me crazy, even though this is the most insane decision I've ever made. I love you, Kang Jae-min. Monster and man, violence and tenderness, all of it. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms in the morning light. Two people from impossible worlds who'd somehow found each other. Outside, Seoul was waking up, the city continuing its relentless forward motion, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in a mansion in the mountains. Amara knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more danger, more moments of terror, more decisions about whether love was worth the cost it demanded. There would be times when she questioned this choice, when the darkness of Jae-min's world threatened to overwhelm the light she was trying to maintain. But for now, in this moment, with his arms around her and his heart beating against hers, Amara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, laughter in the face of danger had been the right response all along. That seeing the humanity in someone everyone else called a monster had been an act of courage rather than foolishness. That sometimes, the most impossible loves were the ones worth fighting for, even if they destroyed you in the process.